Hello, Saranji.
Hi, hi.
Hello, Surendra. It's Gudmundur. How are you?
How are you?
Yes,
Nice to
good
see
of
you. Nice to see you. How's the weather there?
Oh, it's very nice, actually. The
Okay, so
sunshine and not too cold.
I see our neighbor Ambassador Fabian. General Mehta, good evening.
Good
You
evening, dear neighbor.
yes. We have here also Air Marshal Binod Patni is there. And war veteran General Ramesh Chopra.
Good evening, Surinder.
Good evening. Now you can hear me.
Oh, yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I can see Sanjeev Tripathi has come. And Air Marshal Patni has got the flying past behind him. Colors of flying past.
Colorful Air Marshal.
Yes.
Hello, General. How are you?
Hi. Is Ambassador Ronan Sen there?
Yeah.
Hi, Ambassador. How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you, Ambassador.
I can't see you, but I will see you when I switch on to the actual active participant.
Yeah.
So you are there, General Mehta is there, Arun will join late, only Lord Meghnath Desai. Hello. Hi, I can see Gautam Mahajan. Yes. I personally feel that Joe Biden, Harris team also will have the best of relations with India. They will further deepen and expand it. There may be more changes in the style and nuances rather than substance. Because I feel on trade, investment, and tariffs, localization issues of some other, the differences will be there. But two things are very clear. We will not have the conduct of foreign policy through Twitter. I don't think President Biden is going to issue threats on Twitter. Second is, even if they find something which is they are not very pleased with, I'm sure there will not be any public scolding. Even if the air in Delhi is filthy, I'm sure President Biden will not publicly state it's filthy. So this is kind of a style which we will see. But there may be many more other changes, which I don't want to preempt prejudice our distinguished panelists. And that's the reason why I will stop here, rather than any commenting on what may happen, not happen. Now, we are very honored and delighted to have Ambassador Ronan Sen for the first time on our panel. He needs no introduction. He is the only foreign service officer who has served as ambassador to Russia, Germany, USA, and High Commissioner to United Kingdom. He was also Joint Secretary in Prime Minister's office for more than 5 years, directly reporting Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. That says a lot. He knows more about many things than any one of us, but he has been kept his secret to himself, which we will not ask him to reveal. So Ambassador Ronald Sen, while we may be running around like headless chickens, you can set the tone by saying what I want to say. Only two things you kindly keep in mind. You also have 10 minutes like anybody else. I have nobody to alert you. I have no buzzer to, but you keep in mind you have 10 minutes. Second thing is that given the topic, you are welcome to refer to anything. But again, I will urge you to share your thoughts. What's going to, after all, says Biden presidency, India's relations. You will have to, maybe to put it that way, stick your neck out, project, predict, forecast, whatever you say, how this relationship likely to shape in coming years. Over to you, Ambassador Ronan Sen. Now, please unmute your micro. You unmute your audio. Yes.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Quite
okay.
Clear.
All right. Thank you, Ambassador Sundar Kumar. I'm delighted to join you, and I'm honored to also join this distinguished panel. I hope that Lord Desai and Ambassador Arun Singh will be here soon, and glad to see General Ashok Mehta over here. My remarks will be primarily on the basis of my direct involvement. People, unfortunately, I have not met Trump, except only once in passing. But of course, Bush, Obama, Biden in his capacity as in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, both as ranking member and as chairman, Kamala Harris as Attorney General, Mike Pence as Congressman from Indiana, etc. So I will just touch upon, if you agree, just on 2 or 3 issues rather than compressing, my experience of about 4 decades since I've been involved with India-US relations in different capacities in different places, both at high points and low points. So first, I come to China, which is the main focus, for us right now in India, and also the main focus, the main foreign policy and foreign security policy focus of the United States. We can expect, the tone has been set by Trump, it will be followed by Biden. There might be some changes and nuances, etc., but I think it will continue. And there'll be an element of both competing and countering, but not having a conflict with China. And it'll be across the geopolitical, the ideological, trade, technology, etc. We can work with them on certain issues, but we have to be clear that they are not going to, they'll be supporting us on Eastern Ladakh, but they're not going to endorse our claim in terms of territorial terms. And also that there will be no deployment of their forces. We'll have to be alone in this. Now, another aspect I'll say that our interests will intersect on China. They do, and they will continue to, but our situations are not identical. And we'll have to keep the door open for negotiated settlement of outstanding issues, and also to have a balance between competition and cooperation. That is really very important for us. And if we make this a central issue, which it never was during all the years I've been involved, it never was, China was never a central factor. We'd be unnecessarily giving leverage to China to set the tone and tenor, and also the direction of our relations with others. It's not going to be fair to us or to others. So that's a general point I'd like to make, and because we'll have to keep this in view. The other aspect I'll just touch upon very briefly is, since this is related to what I just said, our area of cooperation in the field of defense. We have done in recent years, and the government, particularly in the last 4 years or so, has cleared a lot of the backlog. Because the central message I want to leave is that the promise of the 2005 agreement on defense cooperation has not been reached. And we have all that you've been done is that sign these enabling agreements. There's been a lot of breathless coverage on each of the agreements, but I don't think they are anything more than enabling agreements. And another point I want to leave is, this is not the beginning. Everything is not the beginning. You're saying in some ways a continuation of a process. For instance, defense cooperation began in '87. India was not, like the STA 1. STA 1 was we were the 37th country in the world. But in 1987, we were the 3rd country in the world to get a supercomputer, etc. But that is not here nor there. We have to look practically forward and give more substance to this relationship to carry it forward in a meaningful manner, and also those which involve third countries. I hope the US will continue to be understanding and in relations with our third country relationship, particularly Russia, in terms of CAATSA application. Democracy and human rights, whether we like it or not, will remain a major factor. This is not, I have never seen this being either a democratic issue, or Democrats are more prone to it than Republicans. It's a bipartisan issue there. And we should take that into account. Of course, we can tell them that, physician, heal thyself, because there's a lot of divisions there. But that will precisely be what the Americans will will continue to do, because that will be a top priority. And the domestic policy priority will translate also into their foreign policy. But I agree fully with Ambassador Surendra Kumar when he says that this will not be very shrill. It will be in the backdrop, but it will be there. And also the role of the Congress. Congress will be less constrained to keep things to themselves. And this will definitely continue to play a role there. Third major issue I would like to come to is on trade economic relations. I think it's a major unresolved issue for over the last 2 decades, more, since Ambassador Kumar said, from that time till now. And there's going to be no, we have done a lot through diplomatic maneuvering, through very, very good, diplomatic footwork, but that is not going to remain for very long, and we'll have to tackle some of the basic issues rather than deal with the periphery, like waste our time on the visa issue, which is after all American visas. It's a domestic legislation meant for domestic companies, and if you're availing of 70% of that visa, you can't make it an issue. Similarly, on if because I can tell you straight away, there will be no FTA, none, no chance, because if you are not able to meet the standards of a low ambition RCEP, you will certainly not meet the standards of the USMCA, that is US-Mexico Canada Agreement. Again, on peripheral issues like GSP, where, it is peripheral because if it happens, I think it will be done, part of it will be done, but it's not going to make a substantial difference. So we'll have to focus on basically what we should do in our own interest and to get our economy moving. There will be a top foreign policy and imperative for us. I will leave on this, and incidentally, coronavirus obviously will be a top priority issue. There will be less domestic issue and also globally, and this is again an area where we can cooperate. There will be no such talk, on this Wuhan virus and all that kind of rhetoric. In fact, I think they will join very soon. The United States, which is an outlier, will join the COVAX alliance. There is a vaccine alliance. We have got our strengths there. We should try to cooperate. And there are numerous other issues, but the fundamental point I want to make is that you don't have to be influenced by every development in the US elections. We have to see what is in our own interest and what we should do in our own interest. And if we do that, we'll be meeting a lot of the concerns of our partners elsewhere. Thank you.
Well, Ambassador Sen, it appears the Lord Desai eventually might not join because I have not got any message, it hasn't happened. So would you like to expand a little more on the economic issues? You say GSP, peripheral issue, but GSP amount to $6.5 billion is not a small.
$6.3 billion. They're very small margins, and actual loss about is $260 million, right? But GSP, actually, we have to make up our mind as to what do we really want. Then we can ask Lenin's question, what is to be done? Firstly, what do we want done? Is it so much in our interest? Now, we can't say on one hand that we are one of the fastest growing economies in the world and the fastest growing emerging market. At the same time, make a big issue of joining a regime which was meant for basically developing least developed countries. So we have to decide whether we want to play in the Premier League or simultaneously play in the high school league and in the Premier League. If we make up our mind where do we want to go, it'll be helpful for everybody. So that is why I called it peripheral. Peripheral in the sense of it's 6.3, but the EU is giving something like $27 billion in terms of benefit. So, have a sense of perspective. Even Russia is giving us something. Where do we want? What do we want? Not how do we want to be seen, but what do we want?
Let us talk about WTO. When I interviewed Professor Abhijit Banerjee last month, yes, he said Trump has been putting assault on. He's almost trying to destroy it, and WTO is the biggest bulwark to protect the economic and emerging economy like us, because here you one country, one vote. It's not like our IMF, World Bank, where you're voting rights. And WTO, USA has not been able to dominate, and we must really strengthen WTO. Trump has said he was saying that WTO is no use. Similarly, economy, like Lord Megha Desai, who's not here, he told me that biggest stumbling block for recovery of global economy is ongoing trade war between China and USA. It's just not sustainable, because the world's largest economy, second economy, they have to have some kind of meeting ground. You cannot really be at each other's head. So what do you think about these?
Exactly. I think on both points, there's something to be said. The first point, second point I've covered, because I said, if you, like, for instance, people are talking glibly about decoupling. You can't do that. Sometimes you'll do that by harming yourself even more. Rising inflation, your currency will depreciate. So we have to take a rational view and not get carried away by one issue, and maintain a sense of balance. So in our own interests, and that kind of decoupling is not possible. It causes huge amount of disruption, and that will not happen. Second thing is that to what extent is China itself dependent on foreign trade? It was at one point of time. But it's increasingly, and not just now, but much before the virus, for quite some number of years, domestic consumption is driving growth. Look at the Alibaba, one day sale.
Yeah, a single day.
It is, twice, no, 2.5 times, almost 3 times our total annual sales in terms of e-commerce. And we are one of the most prominent candidates in the world. But have a sense of perspective. WTO, I fully agree with you. But fact is, Ambassador Kumar, is that we have been competing with the United States. We are, the second largest disruptor of the WTO. What we do is unilaterally, they won't accept something. What we do is we maintain, and we are interested in the principle of consensus, and we advocate the principle of consensus for essentially preventing any consensus. And that's the role which we have consistently played in the green room in the WTO. Right from the time it began, or even earlier with GATT on textiles, everything, we blocked. Our role was that of blocking. And we are competing with the United States in terms of the number of anti-dumping regulations, etc. So we have to also look again as to what do we want. If we want something, then we'll have to act like-minded country. We are out of every prudent actor. So,
Okay.
So we have to make up our minds. So basically,
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sen. Thank you. Now I move to Major General Ashok Mehta. He need no introduction. You see him on television channel almost every day. He's hopping from one channel to another channel. You read his articles on different. He says he likes to be called independent defense strategic analyst. So I will stop only on that. Now, General Mehta, 50 years back, a country sent 7th Fleet to the Bay of Bengal to intimidate India. The same country by now has completed more than 300 military exercises, including tri-service exercises, Malabar exercises, in which you have Australia, Japan also joined in. In the last 4 or 5 years, they have given you status of the major defense partner, STA1. You have signed Lemoa, Komkasa, Beka. So now you are on the par with the closest defense or the closest allies of the United States. And this is one area in which, if you see success, in the last 6-7 years, US export have jumped to $20 billion. So what's going on? Are we getting what we need? What happened to the whole hyped idea of joint research and joint production? And in future, how this will shape? Because we still have 60-70% of our defense requirement is still met by Russia. Over to you, Major General Mehta.
The fleet is the movement of the clock, full circle. And so we are now in a position where we enjoy a relationship with the United States almost at a par with what we did with the Soviet Union in the 70s. Let me begin by making one fundamental remark, and which is that the defense and security relationship between India and US is the crown jewel of India-US strategic partnership, or global comprehensive, you can give it any number of prefaces, but it is a partnership that is driven, or that was driven by a defense relationship. I remember when I went to attend the Command and Staff College at Fort Leavenworth in 1975, in the year of the bicentennial. At that time, the only program that was running between India and the US was the education, the Indian military education program, or whatever they called it. And some of us went and trained there. Now, from those days and the days when we were signing the Hawk deal in 2000, we had put the level of suspicion between India and US was so large that in the Hawk deal with the US, we had put a rider that there will be no US parts in that in the Hawk aircraft. There was, because of our sad experience with the helicopters. And from there, we have moved so much and so far that today, as you said, and as others have said, that we are a major defense partner. We start with the most favored non-NATO ally and all the labels that were required. But remember, all this started with Lieutenant General Claude Kicklighter. But I don't want to go back because my time is short.
Yeah. Better come to
And
an end.
so therefore, I will outline the main issues
Okay.
that what is it that we have already achieved and what is it that we haven't got from the US. Now, at the most recent 2+2, Mike Pompeo had said that the United States will help in defending and protecting India's territorial integrity and sovereignty. He told Times Now in a TV interview that India and US will have a joint deterrence. We will jointly deter the Chinese tyranny. Now, no leader in the US has ever committed himself to the defense and sovereignty of India, but as Ambassador Ronan Sen said, that they will not deploy troops, but they will provide you with intelligence and logistics, like the 30,000 winter kits that they have recently provided for our 60,000 troops that are deployed. So what is left to be done is that the defense technology and trade initiative that we signed, and under which there were 7 critical technologies that were to be provided to us. That didn't work out. They told us that we have not signed the Defense Industrial Security Annex, which we signed last year in December 2019. And we signed the 4th foundational agreement, the acronym, which I don't know the expanded.
Yeah, General Mehta, what is happening on joint research and joint production?
Yeah, I'm coming to that. I'm leading on to that from this technology initiative. So they told us that once you sign these 2, DISA and BICA, the road will open towards defense technology. So we have to see whether this rapid reaction cell specifically created for India will open the door to these high-tech defense technologies, the 7 that were listed, will that happen now that we have signed whatever was required to be signed? That's number one. Number two, having signed BICA, we were interested in converting this seller-buyer relationship. I remember up till 1986, we bought only one weapon locating radar, which was called the shoot and scoot during General Sundarji's time. Till 2008, our defense acquisitions were of the order of something like $300–400 million. Today, as you said, Chair, the number is 20 billion. And there are 10 more billion in the pipeline. But this is all seller-buyer. There is no transfer of technology. There is no make in India. And it is all G to G. So this is the other area where there has to be make in India. You can't keep just buying equipment. And the third area is that we want armed drones. And they told us that if you sign the BICA, you will be eligible to buy the armed drones. So we have to see whether in these areas we fulfill these requirements.
What do you think President Biden will continue this cooperation, that expand? I'm more concerned is about what President Biden is likely to do rather than what we will do here.
You see, whether it is Biden or Trump, on defense and security relationship, they need a strong India to contain China. The rise of India, in fact, is more important for the Americans than what it is for many Indians. And that is why the Modi government, thinking that there will never be a war, has so heavily underinvested in defense that the Chinese are doing to us for the last 6 years what they should not have been doing. So in my view, the defense technology and trade initiative will open the door for conversations, because the meeting, we are going to attend this meeting next month of the Defense Industrial Security Annex that is going to take place next month. And it is there that the critical technology issues will be discussed. There are 2 other issues. And again, you referred to these, that the Americans want to wean you away from buying Russian equipment. And you are so heavily invested in Russian investment that 80% of your military equipment platform are Russian origin. And there is this Katsa Damocles' sword waving over you. Now, we have heard about the Katsa waiver on Chabahar, but we have not heard about Katsa waiver on S-400 and the billions of dollars of stores and military equipment that the Chinese are going to provide to us. Remember, the Chinese have provided us critical technologies. The Chinese have leased you nuclear submarines. The Chinese, I beg your pardon, the Russians have provided you the nuclear technology for the nuclear reactor of your indigenous nuclear submarines. As far as core development and core production is concerned, we produced a BrahMos missile. And only last week, the Russian embassy suddenly woke up and said, hey, look, India, we are your exclusive, by the way.
General Mehta, we will have discussed on Russia some other day. Let us come back to USA.
No, no. The Russia is very, very germane to this discussion, because the object of the Americans is to take you away from Russia, and the Katsa waiver is about taking action against adversaries through Sanctions Act. And therefore, if the Americans keep interfering with your defense relationship with Russia, then that is going to be a serious problem for us. So we have to balance India's strategic autonomy will be called here to work in such a manner that you can buy from both the US and the Russians,
And the
and,
French.
and therefore you have to balance these two countries. And there is a last problem, which is Russia's relationship with China and with Pakistan.
Okay, okay, General Mehta, we will confine to the US today.
This is, Ambassador Kumar, much more than a manager trois,
Yeah.
as you ambassadors like to call it. It is like a love jihad.
Okay, you have thrown so many things. Is Ambassador Arun Kumar Singh already here? Arun, are you
Yes,
here?
Ambassador Kumar, I'm here.
Okay, I'm glad that you are here because Lord Desai has not turned up. So you have heard at least part of what General Mehta has said. You might have not heard what Mr. Ronusen has said. Now, we are very glad to have Ambassador Arun Kumar Singh. As you know, he keeps an eye on the development 3 continents. He was ambassador to Israel, he was ambassador to France, and he was ambassador to USA. And also USA not once, he was Washington twice, as DCM, then ambassador. Then he worked also at PMI. So he has been keeping very close watch. Not only that, he had lectured in the John Hopkins University, Pennsylvania University, and he is a senior counselor of the Cohen groups. So, and he writes quite often. You must have seen him beyond television giving his views on a host of subjects. So Arun, I have already mentioned to you that there are so many issues on which the Joe Biden and Harris administration's attitude will directly impact us. For example, American relations with China, then come relations with Russia. Then you have same Indo-Pacific, Quad, TPP, even Iran. So you kindly cover as much you can cover. We will have little extra minute for you because Lord Meghna Desai is not here. You can even cover some of the economy because after all, relations with Iran, if there is a thaw between US and Iran, that will help us in addressing our energy requirement. After all, we were buying Iranian oil, maybe at much cheaper place, and we are forced to. I remember here when the former US ambassador to UN had come here, who come from Punjab, and he told Indian audience at Hotel Leela, look, we have asked Indians to bring down their import from Iran to zero. Now, I hope the Biden will not be making such demand. There might be some kind of relaxation, CASA, but who knows? So over to you, Arun.
Thank you, Ambassador Kumar. So thank you for inviting me to the panel. Thank you for including me with such distinguished panelists. And Ambassador Sen has been my mentor. I had the privilege of working thrice in my career directly with him and benefiting from his guidance.
I escaped him thrice.
And so based on what you had suggested, I'll speak for about 10 minutes or so and cover some of the issues that might come up during a Biden or a Biden-Harris administration. I expect that their policy on Pakistan will be very similar to what the policy on Pakistan of late has been under the Trump administration. The Trump administration has started by being very harsh on Pakistan, Trump criticizing Pakistan for its support to terrorism, cutting off assistance. But ever since they pushed for the dialogue with the Taliban and needed cooperation from Pakistan in that context, then except in the context of the Financial Action Task Force, where Pakistan continues to be on the grey list, there has been no real pressure on Pakistan. And Trump also invited Imran Khan for a meeting in the White House last year in September, and has on several occasions, and I think partly to entice Pakistan into its hook, referred non-seriously about being ready to mediate between India and Pakistan, including on Jammu and Kashmir. I don't think Biden administration will go in that direction, because in the Obama-Biden period, they understood India's clear position on this. But I think their policy of trying to get cooperation from Pakistan in the context of the Taliban will be there as a start, unless they see how cooperative Pakistan is, what's happening on terrorism. And we have to see what happens if President Trump forces, through his new Secretary of Defense, to draw down US presence in Afghanistan very, very significantly. So we will all be faced with a new situation. So that's a sort of an open question. I think on China, the substance of the policy will be very similar to what it has been under Trump, and I think Ambassador Sen also mentioned that. But the tone will change. The sharpness may not be there. And I think a Biden administration will try and see if China can be a little more cooperative on issues related to climate change, related to North Korea, and dealing with COVID. So, and depending on how China responds to this, especially North Korea, because there, as we saw, Trump generated a lot of theater, but not really much progress on the substantive issues. And we have to see how does North Korea behave between now and January in inauguration, because it's a lame duck administration. And this is a time when many countries and adversaries of the US test the United States. And China could use this period also to test the United States. On Russia, President Trump tried to move positively, but he was not able to, because his hands were tied by the US Congress, which also passed CAATSA that has been referred to, because there was a perception in the US that Russia had intervened in the 2016 elections through the social media to help President Trump in his election. So that constrained Trump's ability to move positively. Biden will be very negatively oriented towards Russia because of sense of what they feel happened in 2016. Because of their assessment of Russia's actions in Crimea and in eastern Ukraine. But he will not be constrained politically the same way as Trump was in being able to move positively with Russia should he want to. And an arms control agreement could be a peg to do something which is not on the negative side with Russia. So we have to see how that evolves. Clearly with Europe, Biden will want to move in a positive direction, because European leaders had reacted very negatively eventually to Trump, because he criticized Europe, he criticized NATO, he criticized many European leaders personally. And Biden has said that he will try to revive strong relations with allies. If you saw, the first set of telephone calls he had were with leaders in Europe, with UK, France, and Germany, and that was a clear signal. And from our perspective, whatever will be the other dimensions, if Biden is able to strengthen the transatlantic alliance and the two are able to come at a common position on China, with a more common recognition of the technological, military, and economic challenge from China, it will be a far more effective policy. Because right now, Europe is divided in terms of how to approach China. And for a long time, they focused just on the economic dimension of the relationship, letting US handle the security dimension. And China really had an open playing field in Europe, buying up ports and other facilities. The Belt and Road Initiative has extended there. China has reached Europe in a sense through the Arctic, through railway links and others, and through infrastructure building. So, but with the kind of response China generated in the wake of COVID and the assistance it gave, but then forcing European countries to respond, to acknowledge positively and thank China for the assistance, what has also been referred to as wolf warrior diplomacy. So there's a new ferment in Europe. So I think US may try to bring about a more harmonized US-European position on China. They've started now under Trump a transatlantic dialogue on China. I think the policy on West Asia in the Trump administration is something we'll have to watch. Certainly, Biden does not agree with the Trump approach that has been followed on Iran, but it will be difficult for him to go back to JCPOA as it existed. Because in Iran, there is a certain amount of anger against the United States for walking back from an agreement. And Iran now has also built up a certain stock of enriched uranium, which is beyond what was permitted under the JCPOA. I think some kind of a revised agreement would be attempted by the US, because that is what they may be able to sell better domestically. But whether Iran will be ready for that, especially with elections coming up in Iran in the middle of next year. So that's something to be watched. On Israel, the Gulf Arab countries, Palestine, Biden will not be as pro-Israel as Trump has been, where he moved the embassy to Jerusalem, recognized Israeli sovereignty over Golan Heights, and basically gave a carte blanche to Israel to build new settlements in the West Bank, which was sort of stalled when UAE made that a condition for working out a peace agreement with Israel. But Biden and Obama had pushed Israel for freezing settlement activity. And there was a lot of tension between Israel and the Obama-Biden administration when one set of settlements were announced, new settlements, while Biden was visiting Israel. So I think Biden will try to bring in a little bit more of the Palestinian perspective on those issues, but how it plays out domestically, Trump, even as he hands over power finally, reluctantly in January, will be hovering in the background, trying to generate pressures on Biden and others, trying to revive a sense of that he might be a candidate in 2024, trying to hang on to the Republican Party. And so there'll be constraints in terms of what Biden will be able to do. On trade, again, the very fact that a person like Trump could be elected in 2016 was a reflection that a large part of US population, almost 40%, felt that it had been disenfranchised by the globalization that had taken place post-1990. Their wages stagnated, death rates went up, longevity came down, drug addiction went up. And therefore, there is a sense in the US across the political spectrum, and particularly in the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, that the kind of globalization, that the kind of trade agreements that you had earlier, that is not a viable route anymore. And Biden himself has said that he's not going to sign any new trade agreements until the competitiveness of the American worker is revived, until their skills are built up, until there is more infrastructure construction in the US, the efficiency of the American worker goes up. He has also emphasized Buy America, so there'll be a lot of emphasis on that. And therefore, the question for India would be that if the US is going to continue being restrictive on trade and with greater emphasis on Buy America, then when there is talk of this reordered supply chain, and a supply chain moving away from China or looking at China plus options, and India for its own industrial strengthening, and as our leaders have said repeatedly, we want to become part of a trusted, secure, resilient supply chain, global supply chain. So what will be the space for that for India to be part of this new reordered supply chain? And I think that's the question we all need to ask. On immigration, and I think Ambassador Sen also mentioned that we would expect Biden to be much less restrictive than Trump. I think certainly on H-1B visas, because there is a recognition in the US, while there is a political pressure that, feeling that people coming in under immigrant high-skill visas are taking away jobs from Americans. So that's one dimension. But there is also a recognition that skilled immigrants, especially from India, enable the US to retain its global edge in innovation and technology. So that aspect will have a bearing. So given all this, on India, I believe that the trend of strengthening of the bilateral relationship will continue, as we have seen from the time of Clinton in 2000, through Bush, through Obama, through Trump. And so that will be sustained. On 15th August this year, on our Independence Day, Vice President Biden then as a candidate and Senator Harris had issued a special statement for the Indian American community and for the people of India, where they had said that they'd be fully supportive of India including on the challenge of cross-border terrorism and the challenge that India is facing on its borders. Recently, when President Trump decried or spoke, in a demeaning manner of India being a major emitter, having filthy air, Biden said, "You don't talk about friends like that." So that was that's also part of their election sort of strategies. Now, the Biden-Harris potential administration on 8th November, as part of their victory speech, emphasized that the priorities are going to be four: dealing with the pandemic, dealing with the economy, dealing with racism, and climate change. So clearly domestic policy focused, but dealing with pandemic in terms of vaccines, healthcare issues, dealing with economic revival, dealing with climate change will provide opportunities for international cooperation, including with India. Therefore, I believe that with the transition happening in January next year, the positive trajectory of the India-US relationship will be sustained. There'll be some challenges, there'll be a lot of opportunities, and we have to proactively, creatively seize the opportunities and expand the space for newer opportunities. Thank you.
Okay, you covered a lot and you have really shared views much beyond India and US. Now, just two queries. Look, in transition team, you find 23 Indian Americans, you must have seen in the Twitter. Do you think in the actual cabinet, when it's formed, when President Biden takes over, there's likely to have some of the Indian Americans really getting posted to key positions?
What we have observed, and Ambassador Seth can also bear testimony to that the number of Indian Americans coming into administration increased substantially from the time of the Obama administration. And then suddenly you saw a large number of people there and also on the Hill in staff positions. Again, you might recall that till 2016, there were historically only 3 Indian Americans ever elected to US Congress. Since 2016, there are simultaneously 5 at a point of time through several election cycles. So that's a change that is happening. So more and more Indian Americans are coming into administration. In the Obama administration, the highest position was of a sub-cabinet position. He was the head of USAID. In the Trump administration, it was a cabinet position. Nikki Haley as USPR, and then Seema Verma heading on the healthcare side. So one can expect that in a Biden administration also, there'll be a large number of Indian Americans at important positions. But they need not necessarily be people who are named in the transition team, because those names change.
Okay.
So we'll have to see who are the names that actually make their way through the sifting process.
Now, one query in China. In 2013, when Vice President Joe Biden came to India, he gave an interview to Times of India, which I think I quoted in one of my letters. He clearly said that time it was not Indo-Pacific, it's called Asian Pacific. And he said, US, China, and India are the major players in Asian Pacific. Do you think when President Biden looks at relations with China, this Indo-Pacific, this intent, anti-China intent with Chinese resent, even Russians have been saying there's an anti-China. Do you think this can be toned down?
So, the US policy on China has been evolving. For a long time, the US policy on China was engagement with China. And the assessment was that the more you engage with China, the more China will liberalize both politically and economically. And it was only in the second phase of the George Bush administration that there was a sense of China being also a strategic rival. The Obama administration had started in the beginning by talking of strategic reassurance to China, that the two could manage in a cooperative way their competing interests. But later they moved to a rebalance. First they spoke of a pivot to Asia, then a rebalance to Asia. And that was a signal that they needed to do something differently in that. Trump took it one step further by talking of the Indo-Pacific. But then you must recall that in 2011, as Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton had come to India. And she had given a speech in Chennai, deliberately on India's East Coast, where she has spoken about US and India cooperating in the framework of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific. When President Obama visited India in January 2015 as chief guest on our Republic Day, the first US president, despite we being democracies, have come to India on a Republic Day, a joint statement was issued, a joint strategic vision for the Indian Ocean and the Pacific. So it was a signal that step by step, there is a recognition of the convergence that there is in terms of responding to the challenge of a China that has economically, military, and technologically strengthened. So I would suspect, given this, that there is no going back on the direction that has been sort of taken further under the Trump administration on this issue.
Thank you very much. I think we will stop here and let our people who are attending ask some questions 10-15 minutes. You can ask questions. You can tell whether you are addressing to Ambassador Sen or Ambassador Arun Kumar Singh or Major General Mehta. So who wants to ask questions? My friend from Iceland, you are attending us so far. You go ahead. You ask the question. Yes.
I thank you, colleagues, for inviting me here and allowing me to enjoy this very rich debate. We were here just last month in a kind of peripheral, if I may use that word, that Ambassador Sen was using. But I want to pick up what General Mehta was talking about, the ménage à trois. We're not there. We're in the ménage à cinq at least. And that's what I found a difficult time for India at this time. Which of these issues are you going to center on in the relations with the US? And I say this because it's very hard to have direct relationships only on your own interests with the United States in this kind of a changeover period. And when I say changeover period, I'm not sure it's not a 67-day period, but it may be for the next few years until we understand whether what we've been experiencing in the past 4 years is a fluke, and what we have now is the rule. It's very hard for India to develop policies if we don't know that we don't have the stability that we had under the previous administrations. This is why India will have to, I think, maintain its fingers in so many pies. And the United States doesn't really like that, does it? They want you in your own pie. Those of you who have served in the U.S. Understand this. They don't like, as we've heard already, the relationships that India has with Russia, which we used to have with China.
Okay, I think we have two ambassadors. I think Ambassador Ron Sen, you please go ahead and share your comment. Your audio is not on.
Yes, I'm audible now? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
I would say, and I try to do that very ineffectively, that we should not be, essentially what I was saying is we should not be reactive. And we are not reactive. And we are not going to, lemming-like move in, lockstep with any country. Not with, earlier we did not do that with the Soviet Union. We are not going to do that with America, with the United States. Or with any other place. So that we will have to work out our relationship in terms of our own long-term interests, because the situations are different, the conditions are different. But to the extent that we can, it will never be working in lockstep, but we can go sometimes in parallel, sometimes into prior consultations, and we will have differences also. This is fundamental.
Okay, Arun, you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to add, as Ambassador Sen said, it's clear that each country takes its decision based on its own interests. And US takes its decision based on its political compulsions and its perception of its own interests. And very often that may not coincide with India's interests, be it in relation to Russia, Iran, or whatever. Similarly, we would like to take certain decisions in our interests which the US may not agree with. And I think as we consolidate the relationship with the US, the leaders in both countries and public opinion has to provide space to both for such divergence. Only then the stability of the relationship can be sustained. And so while providing that, we have to identify areas of convergence and work on those. And today there is a tremendous amount of convergence in the interest between India and the US. That is why the positive trajectory has been sustained since 2000 with changes of administration in the US and changes of government in India. And I think that's what's going to provide stability.
When we are talking about US-India race, I'm glad somebody has joined from New York. Puni Sapra has joined from New York. I welcome him. Gurjeet, you want to ask something? Gurjeet, you are still there.
Yes, I'm here, but I am learning without a doubt. I have no question.
You are master of all trade. You go shoot your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Virendra.
So what is your question?
I have no question. I have no question.
Okay, I will move to War Veteran Major General Ramesh Chopra. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Chair. You started with 50 years ago, Bangladesh enterprise. I'll take you to 60 years ago when I fought my first war. Everybody's talked about China. I want to know the US attitude. There's not going to be Pompeo in the next administration. What happened in April, May? Is it going to be exactly the same? We don't want boots, as Ambassador Ronan has said, but we want the international, particularly US backing as a leverage besides what we do tactically on the ground as far as China is concerned. And my second quick question is on the economy. We have recently declined joining the RCEP. Our strategic objective was RCEP. Economically, we were not getting the bargain, so we declined. Now, I want to know if the US does the TPP, then India cannot leave the field open entirely to the Chinese, and will we join this Trans-Pacific Partnership? Thank you.
Okay, I think all three of you can perhaps, Ambassador Ronan Sen, then Arun, and then Major General Mehta can comment. Ambassador Sen.
Yes, first, not necessarily in that order, but TPP, I don't see that happening immediately because, as I said, they have already signed the USMCA, which incorporates basically all the TPP standards, except the USMCA is weaker on the IPR issue because of a specific carve out for US technology companies. And that carve out, we'll have some problems with them going ahead with the United States because there are differences on that between Europe, the United States, us, and some others. So if it happens, it will be with some carve outs, and it will be not identical. 50. Another aspect is that, as I said, the moral support and other international support will continue, I'm sure, with Biden on China, and they will also continue to sell us anything that we require, and also there will be enhanced intelligence sharing of a type which was there at one time, maybe the same level as 1962. Maybe not so demonstrative like U-2 flights taking off from an Indian base, but it will be there very substantially, and there are some various mechanisms for that.
Arun?
So on China, of course, one has to see what happens once the new administration takes over. But from the comments made by Joe Biden, the statements they have issued, and comments made by people who have been working very closely with him, leading players in his campaign on foreign policy issues, they have indicated clearly that the support to India on cross-border terrorism and on the challenge on our border will be sustained. Therefore, what we've seen under Trump on these issues will be sustained, and I don't think there's a going back to 2016 or pre-2016. In fact, it was the Obama-Biden administration that had in 2016 declared India a major defense partner. The DTTI, Defense Trade and Technology Initiative, which has had challenges, has not really made progress, was again started under the Obama-Biden administration as a way to see if we can also do technology partnership, but a lot of work needs to be done. TPP, India cannot join, and that is because TPP has emerged from APEC, and only countries who are members of APEC, some of them went on to work out the TPP among themselves. So before India even looks at going into TPP, it has to be a member of APEC. It is not a member of APEC. TPP out of question, aside from what Ambassador Sen mentioned as the very harsh sort of, from our perspective, norms in terms of market access and other issues. RCEP was, of course, a different trading arrangement where we eventually took the decision not to join. It has been indicated in the US and from comments of some of what are called Trump surrogates or Biden surrogates or people around him, that he could look at the new incarnate of TPP, the CPTPP, to see if it meets US interests, because under US MCA, some of the norms that have been worked out under TPP are already incorporated there. So that's something that they could look at, because that was a step that Trump had taken more on political considerations. My own recommendation would be that it is going to be very difficult for India and the US to enter into any trade agreements in a short time frame. Even this limited trade agreement that we've been working on, we've been hearing since September last year that it's about to be finalized, and nothing has happened, even a limited one. So obviously there are existing interests on both sides which prevent political movement on working out a compromise and a limited trade agreement. It may be more productive for us to look at exploring new areas of economic interaction, because technology is evolving very fast. The way we work, the way we live is changing rapidly and now accelerated by the impact of COVID. So a whole set of new technologies, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, digital, cyber, data, are all evolving and are emerging on the economic landscape. May be better for the two governments and for the private sector on both sides to get into a very deep dive discussion as to what are the complementary areas of exchange and production we can establish in new areas, so that new areas of partnership are built based on which a new trading arrangement can be worked out without challenging existing interests on both sides. That might be a more productive way to go.
Okay, General Mehta, you want to add anything?
Absolutely. I mean, you haven't asked, let me speak after I've spoken.
Please.
On the larger strategic issue, for both India and China, for India and US, China is the main issue. And there is convergence on China between India and US. And in 2006, President-elect Joe Biden had said, and I quote, "My dream is that in 2020, the two closest nations in the world will be India and the US. If that occurs, the world will be a safer place." It's 2020. Joe Biden is president-elect. What more could India have expected as a US forecast? So therefore, my point is that this business of keeping China at bay, the strategic challenge on our frontiers, cannot be done by India alone because of the power asymmetry. We are okay with Pakistan, but when it comes to dealing with China, we need somebody's help. And the only help that is forthcoming now is the United States. How this help will translate on the ground, somebody has already mentioned in terms of intelligence, telephone intercepts, logistics. I think that is important because US troops are not going to deploy there. And joint deterrence that Mike Pompeo talked about 3 days before the elections in the United States, I think should be taken with a pinch of salt. India will have to do this alone, but get these armed drones. Armed drones will be very useful. The Americans have promised this to us. So we should work, besides converting this arrangement between the US and India on this convergence against China, we should be able to convert some of the defense technology and trade initiative and get armed drones. Armed drones will make a very significant difference for India as a coercive capability.
Okay, thank you. Now, as nobody else is asking, I will ask last two questions to Mr. Sen and Arun. Now, you must have seen in Indian press during the campaign, even after result, there have been some concerns expressed that President Joe Biden and Vice President Harris, they might be raising issues about Kashmir or CAA or minority or human rights. So you do remember a couple of months back or last year, whenever EM went to US, he has refused to meet that congresswoman. I think her name is Pamela Singh, or you might correct me. And we might have to deal with this because they may not be doing it so overtly, bluntly like Trump and shooting off Twitter or publicly mimicking Prime Minister Modi as President Trump once did about Harley Davidson motorbikes. But there may be certainly, these are issues which are close to these two personalities, and they will certainly raise them through normal diplomatic channels. What do you think, Ambassador Sen and then Arun?
Yes, Ambassador Kumar, I think I covered that briefly, but what I had said is that issues like this will be there, particularly in the Congress, and it will continue to exist. How we deal with that is a matter for us to handle. And as I said there, also like on economic issues, we should not be seen to, and we should not actually respond to what comes from outside us from time to time. Like during the nuclear deal, it was Iran. We didn't follow all of that. But we should follow what is in our own interest. And so all those issues will come up. But even if they do come up, they will come up, as far as the administration is concerned, in a very gentle manner, in a discreet manner, and without much public display, or even to the extent which Obama made, in City Fort. It'll be less, I feel, because Biden is a different personality. But it will certainly be there. And effectively, since, on major actions like all that we're talking about, on whether it's on immigration or many other things, there is little which, the president, though he's powerful, has little leeway, though significant, in terms of executive decisions. But for other things, you have to go to the Congress. So congressional decisions will, to a certain extent, be affected. And ultimately, it will, whether it's on the economy or whether it's on these other issues, it will have to depend on us in terms of set our own priorities and go ahead accordingly in terms of taking public opinion and all other parties with us.
Okay, Arun, you want to add something? Your audio is...
I agree entirely with what Ambassador Sen has said. And just to supplement, there is a certain salience on human rights issues, as there is on environmental issues within democratic politics in the United States. So the Democratic Party responds in a certain way to that. In some ways, there is advantage to us. For example, when they start talking in strong terms about human rights issues in Hong Kong, in Xinjiang, in Tibet, it works to our advantage. Now, they have also indicated that, this has been from people very close to the at high levels in the Biden campaign, that any differences with India on human rights issues will be discussed as among friends. And therefore, that will be sort of their approach. And then US has its own challenges, systemic racism, voter suppression. So there is nothing that India needs to be defensive about. All societies have challenges, and one has to handle them in whatever way is deemed best at the national level.
Thank you very much. I think our distinguished panelists have done a great job. They have educated us. We are much more informed than when we started this program. So let us give them a virtual round of applause. And thank you all for joining from different places. I'm sure President Biden will not call India a tariff king. He will also not publicly say Delhi air is getting filthier. Good night. Thank you very much.